automatically swoops in and fixes it. But you have to actually get through the courthouse door first.
Correct. And the bouncer at that door is a doctrine called standing.
Standing. We hear this all the time. The case was dismissed for lack of standing. And usually people interpret that as the court is just dodging the question.
And sometimes it really feels that way.
Yeah.
But in simple English, standing just means you need skin in the game.
Okay.
You cannot sue the government just because you are a concerned citizen or because you generally dislike a law. That's not enough. You have to prove 3 very specific things.
Okay, I want to push back on this for a second. Because to the average person, it feels like a total cop-out.
I get it.
If the government passes a law that is clearly unconstitutional, let's say they pass a law saying everyone must wear a red hat on Tuesdays, and I'm a citizen, why do I have to wait until I'm arrested for not wearing a hat to sue? Why can't I just go to court immediately and say, hey, Your Honors, read the First Amendment. This is obviously illegal.
It's a great question, and it goes right to the heart of what a court is in the American system. We tend to think of the Supreme Court as this council of wise elders who look at laws and give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Like a panel of judges on a reality show.
Exactly. But Article 3 doesn't create a council of elders. It creates a system for resolving cases and controversies.
Meaning they aren't there to police the purity of the law in the abstract. They are there to solve an actual fight between 2 people.
Precisely. If there is no fight, no actual injury, there is no judicial power. If you allow anyone to sue just because they're angry about a law, you essentially turn the courts into a second legislature.
A debating society.
A debating society. If you don't like the Red Hat law, the Constitution says your primary remedy isn't a lawsuit, it's an election. You vote the bums out.
Okay, so the court is basically saying, stay in your lane. Unless this law has literally hit you in the face, this is a political problem for Congress and the voters, not a legal one for us.
Exactly. And to prove it hits you in the face, you need those 3 keys to unlock the courthouse door. First, you need an injury, in fact.
Injury, in fact.
You must have been actually hurt, or you're immediately about to be hurt. It can't be a hypothetical what if. It has to be concrete. Second, causation. The defendant, so the government or whoever you're suing, must have been the one who caused that injury.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third one?
The third one is redressability.
Redressability. That's a mouthful.
It is, but it just means the court has to be able to actually fix your problem. If the court rules in your favor, does the injury go away? If the answer is no, then you don't have standing.
Okay, let's do a specific hypothetical to test this. Let's say the government spends $10 million of my tax dollars to build a statue in the town square. And it is hideous. It's the ugliest statue ever made. Let's say it's a giant, terrifying clown holding a balloon.
Oh, wow, okay.
I hate it. It offends my aesthetic sensibilities. It ruins my walk to work. Can I sue the government to take it down?
Generally, no. You lack standing.
But I'm a taxpayer. It's my money. That $10 million came from the public pot, which I contributed to.
And that's a common argument, but courts have almost always held that being a taxpayer isn't a direct enough interest for standing in most cases.
Why not?
Because it's what they call a generalized grievance.
A generalized grievance.
Right. The ugly statue is shared by everyone in the town. It's too diffuse. It's not particular to you. If every taxpayer could sue every single time the government spent money on something they disliked, the entire government would grind to a halt within 20 minutes.
The courts would be flooded.
Completely. Your injury is really just that you don't like the policy, and that's a political grievance, not a legal one.
Okay, fine. Let's change the scenario. What if that ugly clown statue is poorly built, there's a big windstorm, the statue falls over, and it crushes my car?
Now you have standing.
Because now I have a real injury.
Exactly. Let's run the checklist. 1, do you have an injury, in fact? Yes, your car is destroyed. That is concrete and particular to you.
Okay.
2, causation. Did the government statute cause it? Yes, it fell on your car. 3, redressability. Can the court fix it? Yes, they can order the government to pay you for a new car. You have skin in the game.
That total sense.
Yeah.
So you can't just be a bystander complaining about the game from the cheap seats.
Yeah.
You have to actually be tackled to call a foul.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, there are also rules about timing, right?
Yeah.
I've heard you can't be too early and you can't be too late.
Right. These are the twin doctrines of ripeness and mootness. Think of a banana. You don't want it when it's green, and you don't want it when it's brown and mushy. You need it to be perfectly ripe.
Okay, let's start with ripeness. The green banana.
Ripeness means the case must be ready. The legal fight cannot be speculative or premature. Let's use a hypothetical. Imagine your city council proposes a new law to seize your backyard to build a park.
Okay.
They haven't passed it. They are just talking about it in a committee meeting. The local news runs a story.
And I panic. I hire a lawyer. I run to the courthouse and say, stop them. They're going to take my garden.
The judge will look at you and say, come back later. This case is not right.
Oh, why not? It seems like a real threat.
But you haven't been hurt yet. The law might not pass. They might change the plans and decide to take your neighbor's yard instead. The injury is speculative. The court doesn't want to waste its time and resources on things that might never happen.
So you have to wait until the axe is actually falling.
Pretty much.
Okay, so that's ripeness, being too early. What about the other end? Mootness. The brown banana.
Mootness is the opposite. The controversy must be live at all stages of the lawsuit. If the problem solves itself while you are arguing in court, the case becomes moot.
Give me a scenario for that.
Okay. Suppose you sue a university because they won't let you enroll in a specific required chemistry class. You argue it's discrimination or, some unfair procedure.
Right.
But the legal process is very slow. It takes 2 years. While the case is dragging on, the university changes its mind. They let you into the class, you take it, you pass, and you graduate with your degree.
So I won, in a sense. I got what I wanted, but now I'm standing in court holding my diploma.
And the judge will look at the case and say, go home. The lawsuit is moot. There's no relief the court can give you that you don't already have. There is no longer a live controversy, so they will dismiss the case.
It's like arguing over who gets the last slice of pizza after someone has already eaten it.
Exactly. The court doesn't deal in what-ifs or history lessons. They deal in resolving active, ongoing disputes. And this actually connects to another really important limitation. Federal courts do not issue advisory opinions.
Right, so Congress can't just call up the Supreme Court and say, hey, we're thinking about passing this law about, say, internet regulation. Is it constitutional? Can you proofread it for us?
No, absolutely not. That would be an advisory opinion. And the courts are forbidden from giving them.
Why? Wouldn't that be more efficient?
It might seem so, but it would destroy the separation of powers. It would make the court part of the lawmaking process. There must be a real fight between adverse parties. The court won't give advice on hypothetical disputes. They force the legislature to take the risk, pass the law, and then see if someone withstanding challenges it.
They really, really try to stay in their lane.
They do. There's even a doctrine for when they explicitly choose to stay out of a fight. It's called the political question doctrine.
Okay, what's that?
This is where the court looks at an issue and says, you know what? This is too messy. This is a political fight, not a legal one. The Constitution gave this specific power to the president or to Congress, and we are not getting involved.
It's like when a parent says to their kids, work it out amongst yourself.
Pretty much. They just step back and let the political branches duke it out.
Yeah.
This often happens with things like foreign policy decisions or the internal procedures of Congress.
Okay, so let's say I've navigated all of this. I have standing. My case is ripe. It's not moot. I go to court. I lose in the lower court, and I want to appeal all the way to the top, to the Supreme Court. How do I get there?
Well, most people think you have a right to be heard by the Supreme Court. You absolutely do not. The Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction, which means they review the homework of lower courts.
Right.
But crucially, they also have discretionary review.
They can just say no.
They say no to almost everyone. They get thousands of petitions every year, somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 petitions. And they hear maybe 80 to 100 cases a year. It's harder to get your case heard by the Supreme Court than it is to get into Harvard.
So what's the magic ticket? How do you get in?
It's called a writ of certiorari, which is Latin for to be more fully informed. Everyone just calls it cert.
Okay, cert. And how do you get cert?
The mechanism to get it is called the Rule of 4.
The Rule of 4.
Yeah.
Sounds like a secret society.
It's actually just simple math. There are 9 justices on the court. It takes 4 of them voting yes in private conference to grant cert and hear the case.
So if you only get 3 votes, you're out. The lower court's decision stands.
You're out. The game is over for you.
So you only need 4 votes to get the case heard, but you need 5 votes a majority to actually win the case on the merits.
And that little bit of math leads to some absolutely fascinating poker games behind the scenes.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine you are a justice. You see a lower court ruling that you absolutely hate. You think it's egregiously wrong. You want to overturn it. You talk to your colleagues, and you have 3 other friends on the court who agree with you. You have your 4 votes for cert. Do you take the case?
I assume yes. We have the 4 votes to get in the door. Let's go.
But do you have the 5th vote to win the final ruling? Because if you grant cert and you drag this case all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then you lose the final vote 5-4.
Oh, then I've just taken that bad lower court ruling and made it into a binding Supreme Court precedent for the entire country.
You have cemented the loss. You made it infinitely worse.
Wow.
This is a real phenomenon. It's called a strategic defensive denial. Sometimes justices will vote against hearing a case that they actually care deeply about simply because they do a head count and they're afraid they don't have the fifth vote to win. They don't want to risk it.
So the rule of four isn't just a turnstile. It's a constant strategic risk assessment.
Precisely.
Fascinating. So that's the referee. Now let's move to the engine room. Section 2. The powers of Congress.
The rule makers. Article 1 of the Constitution.
The rule makers. Now, the big concept here, as I understand it, is that Congress doesn't have infinite power. They have enumerated powers. There is a specific list in the Constitution of what they're allowed to do.
Right. This is fundamental. Unlike a state government, which generally has broad police power to do whatever it thinks creates order and safety, the federal Congress only has the powers that are written down in the text. It's a shopping list.
And what's on the list?
Things like the power to coin money, to establish post offices, to declare war, to raise an army, to regulate patents. It's a specific set of jobs.
Let's be real. Congress does a lot more than just coin money and run the post office. They regulate the internet, they fund schools, they set clean air standards. None of that is on the list.
That is because of what many people call the cheat code.
The cheat code, I love that. What is it?
It is the necessary and proper clause.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does that clause actually say?
It says Congress can make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution their other enumerated powers.
Give me this simple English version of that.
Okay. The shopping list says Congress can establish post offices. It does not explicitly say Congress can hire mail carriers or buy mail trucks or print stamps or make it a federal crime to steal mail.
Right, those details aren't in there.
But in order to have a post office that actually works, you need those things. So the necessary and proper clause implies that Congress has the power to do all the things needed to get the main job done.
It expands the list. It fills in the gaps.
It's a massive expansion. That's why it's also called the elastic clause. It stretches the listed powers to fit the current situation. If you have the power to raise an army, the necessary and proper clause implies you have the power to start a draft or build a tank factory.
Now, if the necessary and proper clause is the cheat code, then the commerce clause is the heavy hitter. This seems to be the one Congress uses for almost everything.
It is the superweapon of federal power, absolutely. The Commerce Clause says Congress has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, with Indian tribes, and, this is the key phrase, among the several states.
Among the several states. Okay, on its face, that sounds like it just means trade that crosses state lines.
Yeah.
You know, a truck full of widgets driving from New York to Jersey. If I sell apples in New Jersey to a guy in New York, Congress can regulate it.
That's how it started. That was the original understanding. But over the last century, it has expanded dramatically via a concept called substantial economic effect.
Here is where it gets really interesting and honestly a little controversial. Let's talk about the wheat farmer hypothetical. This is a classic case, right?
It is. It's the case that every law student reads. It's called Wickard v. Filburn from 1942.
Set the scene for us.
Okay. Imagine a farmer, Roscoe Filburn. He's growing wheat during the Great Depression. To keep prices from collapsing, the federal government has put a cap on how much wheat farmers can grow and sell. Filburn follows the rule for the wheat he sells in the market. But on the side, he grows a little extra wheat, not to sell, but just to feed his own chickens and bake bread for his family.
Okay, stop there. This is wheat that never leaves his property. It's
Yeah.
not sold. It definitely doesn't cross state lines. It's not commerce in the sense of trade or business. It's
Yeah.
just a guy making his own lunch.
Right.
How in the world does the federal government have the right to regulate his personal chicken feed?
That was Roscoe Filburn's exact argument. He said, this is local, this is personal. You have no jurisdiction here. This has nothing to do with interstate commerce.
And honestly, looking at the plain text of the Constitution,
Yeah.
he seems to have a pretty strong case.
You'd think so. But the Supreme Court unanimously disagreed with him. They used what's called the aggregation principle.
Aggregation.
They said, essentially, sure, Roscoe, your little bit of extra wheat doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. But what if every farmer in America did what you did?
Then nobody would be buying wheat on the open market.
Correct. The national demand for wheat would collapse. Prices would tank. The entire federal program would be destroyed. So your tiny local non-commercial act, when aggregated, when multiplied by 1 million farmers, has a substantial economic effect on the interstate wheat market.
Wow. So because I'm not participating in the market, because I'm growing my own wheat instead of buying it, I am therefore affecting the market for wheat, and so the feds can regulate me.
That is the logic, and that is how Congress gets the power to regulate things that seem totally local.
That feels incredibly slippery.
Mhm.
I mean, by that logic, couldn't Congress regulate almost anything? If I decide not to buy a car and bike to work instead, I'm affecting the national car market. If I decide to skip the gym and exercise at home, I'm affecting the healthcare market.
You have just identified the exact argument that conservatives and libertarians have been making for 80 years. This logic implies a federal police power that has almost no limit. It's the legal basis for the war on drugs, for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 applying to private businesses, and for countless environmental laws. They argue it all ties back, in some way, to the national market.
That is a massive amount of power.
It is. But they have another tool in their belt that's just as strong, and maybe even stronger: the power of the purse.
Money talks.
Money talks. Congress has the taxing power and the spending power. They can tax to raise revenue for the government, and they can spend money for the general welfare. And they use this spending power to control states in ways they technically aren't allowed to.
How so?
Well, Congress cannot just pass a law ordering a state legislature to, say, lower its speed limit. That's unconstitutional. We'll get to that later.
They can't just boss the states around.
No, but they can condition federal funds.
The
Essentially, yes. Let's use a real example. Back in the 80s, Congress wanted every state to raise the drinking age to 21. They couldn't just order it. The Constitution doesn't give them power over local alcohol sales.
Right. That's a state issue.
But what they could do is pass a law that says, hey, states, here is a big pile of money for highway repairs. We know you love federal highway money. If you want this check, you have to raise your drinking age to 21.
And if a state refuses?
Then they don't get the money. They are free to keep their drinking age at 18, but they have to fix their own potholes.
So it's voluntary. But not really. It's voluntary with a financial gun to your head.
It's financial inducement. The Supreme Court has said that as long as the condition is related to the spending, in this case highway money for highway safety, which is affected by drunk driving, it's usually legal.
Okay, before we leave Congress, we have to touch on their investigatory power. We see this on TV all the time. Congressional committees, big hearings, people shouting at witnesses.
Right. And the Constitution doesn't explicitly say Congress shall have the power to investigate, but the courts have said it is incident to the power to legislate.
Meaning you can't write good laws if you don't know what's going on in the world.
Exactly. And the main tool they use to find out what's going on is the subpoena.
Right. They can force people to show up and testify under oath.
Yes. If it helps them write laws or oversee the executive branch, they can ask the questions. It's their way of gathering intelligence to do their main job.
Okay, let's move from Capitol Hill down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. Section 3, the President, the enforcer.
Executive branch, Article 2.
We've established that the President is the commander-in-chief, controls the nuclear codes, and generally runs the show. But what is the core legal duty of the presidency?
It's found in a little phrase called the Take Care Clause. The Constitution says the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That sounds almost passive, like a manager just making sure the trains run on time.
It is, in theory. The president doesn't make the laws, he executes them. But executing implies a lot of choices and discretion. How hard do you enforce a certain law? Do you prioritize arresting bank robbers or jaywalkers? Do you focus environmental enforcement on factories or individuals? That discretion is where a huge amount of the power lies.
But the president also has a very direct say in making laws through the veto.
Correct. The veto is a huge power, but there's a specific type of veto I want to highlight because it's such a sneaky strategic move. It's called the pocket veto.
The pocket veto. It sounds like something a magician does.
Yeah.
Does it work?
So normally when Congress passes a bill and sends it to the president, he has 10 days, excluding Sundays, to sign it. If he does nothing for 10 days, it automatically becomes law anyway, assuming Congress is still in session.
So he can't just ignore it to kill it. He has to actually send a formal veto back to Congress.
Usually, yes. BUET. There's a loophole. If Congress passes a bill and then immediately goes on vacation, they adjourn for a recess, and the president does nothing. The bill just dies.
So if the 10-day clock runs out while Congress is gone, the bill just evaporates.
Poof. It's a Pocket veto. He just put it in his pocket and forgot about it. And because Congress isn't there to receive a veto message and potentially override it, the bill is dead.
That is a sneaky move. It's all about running out the clock at the end of a session.
It's all about timing. It's a way to kill a bill without the political drama of a formal veto message that Congress can then vote on.
Let's talk about another famous power. The pardon power. We hear about this a lot, usually at the end of a presidential term. Can the president just pardon anyone for anything?
No. There are two very important limits. First, the pardon power only applies to federal offenses.
Only federal crimes.
Right. The president cannot pardon a state crime. If you robbed a liquor store in California and violated state law, the president can't help you. Only the governor of California could do that.
Okay, that's a big limit. And the second one?
He cannot pardon in cases of impeachment. If an official is impeached by the House and convicted by the Senate, the president can't just wave a wand and reverse that. That would completely defeat the whole purpose of checks and balances.
That makes perfect sense. Now let's talk about the world stage, foreign relations. The president is the commander-in-chief.
Right. He is the head of the military, he can direct troops, but the Constitution explicitly says Congress has the power to declare war.
This has always seemed like a major tension point. The U.S. hasn't formally declared war since World War II, but we've certainly been in a lot of wars since then.
It's a huge source of tension. In practice, the president can act in actual hostilities without a declaration. I mean, if the country is attacked, he doesn't have to wait for a vote from Congress to shoot back.
Of course.
But over time, presidents of both parties have used this inherent authority to initiate conflicts, arguing that as commander-in-chief in a dangerous world, they need the flexibility to act fast.
And what about making deals with other countries? Treaties.
The treaty clause in the Constitution says the president negotiates treaties, but he needs a two-thirds vote of the Senate to ratify them.
Two-thirds of the Senate. That is a very high bar.
It is an extremely high bar. It's very, very hard to get. So for the last 100 years or so, presidents have found a workaround. It's called an executive agreement.
And what's the difference?
Functionally, not much. It's a deal with a foreign nation. But legally, an executive agreement doesn't need the Senate's approval. It's an agreement done on the president's authority alone.
That seems like a massive loophole. I can't get the Senate to agree, so I'll just call it something else and do it myself.
It is, and it's controversial. But most of our international business today, trade deals, environmental pacts, is done via executive agreements, not formal treaties, simply because getting 67 senators to agree on anything is nearly impossible.
So we have the referees, the rule makers, and the enforcer. Now let's go to Section 4. Interbranch wrestling. This is where it gets good. Checks and balances in action.
This is where all the friction we've been talking about really happens.
We've established that the president is the commander-in-chief, controls the entire federal bureaucracy, and has the veto. I mean, that is a terrifying amount of consolidated power for one human being.
It is, and you have to remember the founders were terrified of it too. They had just fought a whole war to get away from a king.
So if you build a chess piece that powerful, the queen on the board, effectively, how do you stop it from just wiping out all the other pieces?
You have to invent specific, powerful moves that the other pieces can use to block, tackle, or in the most extreme case, remove that queen from the board entirely.
And that brings us to the ultimate weapon in this arsenal, impeachment.
The ultimate check.
Who can be impeached?
The president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States. So that includes federal judges and cabinet secretaries.
And for what reason?
The Constitution lists treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
High crimes and misdemeanors. That is one of those phrases that everyone says, but what does it actually mean? Does it mean the president has to have, robbed a bank?
Not necessarily, and this is a key point. It does not have to be a statutory crime you could be indicted for, like robbery or murder. High crimes is an older term that refers to a profound abuse of public trust.
So it's a political term, not just a criminal one.
Exactly. If a president acts in a way that fundamentally destroys the integrity of the office, even if it's not technically illegal in the criminal code, it can be considered a high crime. It's about fitness to serve. Ultimately, it's whatever the House of Representatives, which brings the charges, decides is a serious enough violation of the office.
Now let's look at another wrestling match. This one between Congress and all the government agencies. This is the delegation of power. And this is probably one of the most relevant topics for modern news.
This is a huge, huge hot button issue right now at the Supreme Court.
So The basic principle is the non-delegation doctrine. The idea is that Congress is supposed to make the laws. They can't just give that power away, right? They can't just pass the buck to the president or some agency.
Right. Congress can't pass a law that just says the Environmental Protection Agency can do whatever it thinks is best to save the environment. Good luck.
That's too broad.
It's way too broad. It's giving away their core legislative power. To delegate properly, they need to provide what the courts call an intelligible principle.
An intelligible
A
principle.
clear guiding standard. So they could say, the EPA shall set standards to ensure the air is clean enough to protect public health with an adequate margin of safety. That gives the agency a goal and a standard to work with.
But lately, the courts have been clamping down on this even more with something called the major questions doctrine.
This is critically important for understanding a lot of recent Supreme Court cases. The major questions doctrine says that for issues of vast economic and political significance, an agency cannot just decide to regulate it on their own. Congress must have explicitly and clearly told them they could.
Let's do a hypothetical for that one.
Okay. Imagine there's an old law from 1934 that was written to regulate telephone lines. And today, the FCC decides, hey, we're going to use this old law about phones to regulate the entire internet.
Okay, that's a huge shift. That's definitely vast economic and political significance.
Absolutely. Under the major questions doctrine, the court would likely say, no, stop. Congress did not mention the internet in 1934. If you want to regulate the entire modern internet, Congress needs to pass a new law saying so very clearly. An agency can't just discover that power by stretching the old words of a statute that was written for a different world.
So it's the court forcing Congress to actually do its job and make the big decisions rather than letting unelected agency officials make them.
Precisely. It's about pulling power back from the administrative state and giving it back to the elected legislative branch.
One more topic in this wrestling match. Immunity and privilege. Can the president do whatever he wants? Can he be sued?
It's a great question, and the answer is, it depends. We have to draw a very sharp line between official acts and unofficial acts.
Okay, give me the breakdown.
For official acts, things the president does as part of his job as president, he has executive immunity from civil lawsuits for damages.
So if the president orders a drone strike and it accidentally damages someone's private property, he can't be personally sued for the cost of that damage.
Correct. That is an official act. He has absolute immunity from civil damages. The reasoning is that we can't have the president terrified of being sued every time he makes a tough decision. The remedy for a president being bad at his job is impeachment or an election, not 1,000 lawsuits.
Okay, but what about unofficial acts?
For private conduct, there is no immunity. Let's say the president is on vacation, he's driving his own private car, and he crashes into his neighbor's fence because he was texting and driving.
That's not a presidential act. That's just being a bad driver.
Exactly. That is an unofficial act. He has no immunity from that. He can be sued in civil court just like anyone else. Being president doesn't give you a shield from your private mistakes.
I like that distinction. It separates the office from the person holding it.
That's the entire goal.
Okay, Section 5. We've talked about the federal branches fighting each other. Now let's talk about the layer cake of power, the fight between the federal government and the state governments.
Federalism. This is the vertical separation of power, as opposed to the horizontal separation between the branches.
We have the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution, which basically says when they fight, federal wins.
The short version is yes. If a federal law and a state law are in direct conflict, the federal law is the supreme law of the land, and the state law is void.
And this leads to a concept called preemption. This is when the feds basically take over an entire area of law.
Right. And there are a few flavors of preemption. The easiest is express preemption. That's where Congress says, right there in the text of the law, we are handling this, and all state laws on this topic are preempted.
Clear enough.
Then there's implied field preemption. This is where the feds regulate an area so heavily, think of things like nuclear safety or alien registration and immigration, that the courts conclude there is simply no room left for the states to do anything. The field is full.
And conflict preemption.
That's the most direct. It's when you literally cannot follow both laws at the same time. If a federal law says, you must label this product with warning X, and a state law says, it is illegal to put warning X on this product, you can't obey both, the state law has to give way.
But the states aren't powerless. The 10th Amendment reserves powers to them, and there is a really important protection for them called anti-commandeering. This is a fun one.
The anti-commandeering doctrine is essential to federalism. It means the federal government cannot commandeer the state's machinery of government. They can't force a state legislature or state police to do their bidding.
Explain the Montana plastic bag hypothetical for us.
Okay. Imagine the federal government wants a nationwide ban on plastic bags, but they don't want to pass a federal ban and use federal agents to enforce it everywhere. Maybe they don't have the manpower or the money. So instead, they pass a law that orders the state of Montana to pass its own law banning plastic bags.
So they're saying, hey, Montana, you do our dirty work for us. Pass this law, or else.
That is unconstitutional. That is commandeering. The feds can regulate individuals directly, but they cannot issue direct orders to the state government itself. The state government is a co-sovereign, not a branch office of the federal government.
Wait, how is that different from the highway bribe we talked about earlier with the drinking age? That felt pretty forceful.
That is a fantastic question and a crucial distinction. The highway bribe is an offer. It's Congress using its spending power. It says, here is a big pile of money if you choose to do X. The state can always say no and give up the money.
Okay.
Commandeering is a direct order. It says, you must do X. There is no choice. That is the difference between persuasion and compulsion. One is a carrot, the other is a stick.
That is a fine line, but I see it now. What about sovereign immunity, the 11th Amendment?
In simple English, this basically means you generally can't sue a state for money in federal court without the state's consent.
So if the state of Florida's Department of Transportation damages my property and owes me money, I can't just drag them into federal court.
Generally, no. States are sovereign entities. They have a shield against being sued by private citizens for damages. It's an old concept from English law that you can't sue the king in the king's own court. There are some important exceptions, but the default rule is that states are immune.
Okay, we are in the home stretch here, Section 6. This is one of the trickiest but most important parts of the economic engine of the country, the Dormant Commerce Clause.
It sounds sleepy, doesn't it? Dormant. But it's actually very active and causes a lot of litigation.
So we already know Congress can regulate interstate commerce, but what if Congress doesn't do anything? What if they are silent on an issue?
That is the dormant part. The idea is that the Commerce Clause doesn't just give power to Congress, it also has a negative side. Even when Congress is silent, the Constitution itself implies that states cannot mess up the national market.
And the main rule is, states cannot discriminate against out-of-state businesses.
Right. The whole point of the Constitution, in many ways, was to create one country with one unified national market. A state cannot act like a little kingdom, putting up walls to protect its own businesses from competition from other states.
Hypothetical time. The milk tax.
A classic. Imagine State A produces a lot of milk. They want to help their local dairy farmers, so they pass a tax. Any milk produced locally in State A is tax-free, but any milk imported from neighboring State B has a special $1 per gallon tax added to it.
So they're making the imported milk more expensive to give the local guys a competitive advantage?
Exactly. That is a textbook violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause.
Right.
It is unconstitutional discrimination. You cannot punish out-of-state competitors to benefit your in-state economy. It's economic protectionism, and the Constitution was designed to destroy that.
But there are exceptions, because I can think of times when states do favor their own people. The most obvious one is college tuition.
Yes. You found the big exception. This is called the market participant exception.
Explain that distinction.
The rule against discrimination applies when the state is acting as a regulator, when it's making the rules of the game for everyone else. But when the state decides to get off the sidelines and act as a participant in the market, like a buyer or a seller, it can choose who it wants to do business with, just like a private company.
So a state university is, in this context, selling education.
Correct. They are a participant selling a product. So they are allowed to say, we will sell this product cheaper to our own residents in state tuition because their families have been paying taxes that support this university. That is seen as a subsidy to its own citizens, not a regulation of the market.
What about a state construction project?
Same idea. If the state is building a bridge and it's the one buying the cement, it can choose to buy only local cement. It is the customer. A customer can choose who to buy from. But what the state can't do is pass a law saying everyone else in the state, all private construction companies, must buy local cement.
That distinction is crucial. Regulator versus participant.
It's the difference between setting the rules of the game and actually playing the game yourself.
So we've covered the whole board. We've seen the referee, the courts with all their gatekeeping rules like standing and ripeness. We've seen the rulemaker, Congress, stretching its powers with the Elastic Clause and the Commerce Clause. We've seen the enforcer, the president, using pocket vetoes and executive agreements. We've seen them all wrestle. And we've seen the states trying to hold their own ground.
It's a very complex system with a lot of moving parts.
It really is. And looking at all of these terms we've defined, standing, ripeness, commandeering, checks and balances, it seems like the entire system is designed to be incredibly slow and frustrating.
It is, by design.
I mean, if we look at everything we covered today, the impossible difficulty of passing a law, the friction of the veto, the slow crawl of the courts just to decide if they'll even hear a case, it feels like the system is broken. We want solutions to problems now.
But the provocative thought I want to leave you with is this. Maybe the system isn't broken because it's slow. Maybe we are the ones who are broken because we've forgotten that the slowness is the point. The Constitution is not designed for efficiency. It's designed for safety.
It is designed to prevent tyranny. It is designed to make it incredibly difficult for any one person or any one group to accumulate enough power to flip the whole board over.
Every step requires consensus.
Right. If you can't get standing, you can't use the courts as your personal political weapon. If you can't get 2/3 of the Senate to agree, you can't make a permanent treaty. If you can't get the president to sign your bill, you need a supermajority of Congress to override him.
So when we see Congress stop passing major laws because it's too hard, and then the president starts ruling by executive order to get around them, and then the courts have to step in with things like the major questions doctrine, we aren't really playing the game by the rules anymore. We're all trying to find shortcuts because we're impatient with the built-in friction of the game itself.
So the final question for our listeners to think about is the gridlock we all complain about constantly actually a feature of the system, not a bug?
That is the ultimate question. That friction, as frustrating as it is, might be the only thing that preserves the system in the long run.
It's something to think about the next time you see a headline about a stalled bill or a court injunction. It might just be the rules of the game working exactly as intended.
Now that you know these terms, I promise, you are going to spot them in the news this week. Once you see them everywhere.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.
Take care.